DuckTales Episode 5, Terror of the Terra-Firmians. How was it? It was meh. So the premise is that Webby, the boys, Lena, Mrs. Beakley, and Launchpad go to this film, a horror film about mole people. Launchpad sort of has this like freak out, thinking everyone's like a mole person. Mrs. Beakley tries to snap him out of it. While she's distracted, Huey, Webby, and Lena go to the underground because Webby talks about these creatures called the Terras and the Firmians, and they're known as the Terra-Firmians. They live underground. They caused an earthquake, but this is a Huey directed episode in a way. Huey and Webby, and Huey is like the Boy Scout. He is the older. Well, he represents the older versions of the previous trio in DuckTales, and he's like the junior woodchuck, and he basically consults the junior woodchuck guide the whole time, saying that they don't exist, that is just normal earthquake. So basically they go underground. Eventually Mrs. Beakley and the others follow them, find them, and they're in this abandoned train in the abandoned subway, and they just need to get out when it starts caving in, and suddenly nothing is as it appears. So one thing I have to say is that it's good to see an episode with more Huey in it. He wasn't exactly a most interesting character, but it did feel like he was ignored a lot of the time. It only got to episode 5 where we have an episode dedicated to Huey. Huey and Webby, because it's basically her and Huey arguing whether the Terra-Firmians are real or not. And, some people are a bit annoyed because they feel as if there's way too much Webby. And at this point, I'm a little bit annoyed, only because we don't really have enough of Donald or Uncle Scrooge yet. And this is episode 5, and we haven't seen them since, episode 3 was the last time we saw Scrooge McDuck. And I think it was episode 2 maybe, when we actually properly saw Donald last time. So at this stage, I feel as if there's just a little bit too much Webby compared to the fact that we haven't really seen much of Donald and Uncle Scrooge, who are characters that I would really like to see more of because they're my favourite from the previous series. We get a bit more of Launchpad, which is kind of funny. His whole paranoia towards Dewey and some of the others, thinking that all of them are mole people, and it is a little funny at first, but it just gets old really quickly. And you find out that Dewey is his best friend. Even Dewey was surprised by it, but I don't know, it just feels like completely out of nowhere. I suppose it is just because of Launchpad's mannerism and the way Dewey acts. You could see it happen, but at the same time, we haven't really seen much screen time of these two characters together. Maybe I'm looking too much into it, but I just kind of felt that was a little forced in a way. I think that could have worked a little better if it was Mrs. Beakley or if Scrooge was in this episode. But what can you do? We also get a little bit more development with Lena and her sort of alliance, I suppose, with her aunt. We also see how Mrs. Beakley reacts to Lena hanging around with Webby, and of course, like if you've been watching since the beginning, you'd see that Mrs. Beakley wouldn't approve of Webby hanging out with Lena because she feels she's a bad influence, especially since she suggested the horror film to watch. But eventually, it's pretty obvious that Beakley, maybe I was wrong about you, and that sort of thing. So yeah, Lena gets to hang out with Webby and the boys. There's also the whole thing with the Terra-Firmians, the creatures underground, which is apparently a reference to a story or sorry, creatures from a story in the comics, which I have not read at all. I literally have no idea what they're like in the comics, and I do remember reading something about they were in an episode of the old DuckTales, but I did not see that episode, so I know nothing about their origins. Um, and this episode didn't really make me feel that much interested in looking them up because I don't know, this it just felt like a weird sort of vibe I got because it didn't feel like it knew the creators didn't feel like they knew what they were doing with the Terra-Firmians in this. I don't know, it like when you see it at the end, it just feels like you kind of get it, but I don't know, I just felt it was a little bit forced in trying to make them really scary. I did kind of like their reaction to Huey and the others, um, when they see them in the light properly, and they both kind of feel the same reaction towards the other one, the kids' reaction to the Terra-Firmians. I thought that was a little funny in a way. And also I noticed the sort of color scheme as well. So green, blue, red, pink for Webby, and the gray for Lena. The Terra-Firmians, each of them, like, one was at least one of those colors. So there was a blue one, green one, red one, pink and gray. I did kind of like the ending of this episode, in the sense that when Webby sort of feels as if she's proved Huey wrong, and of course she does, because Huey is heavily invested that the Junior Woodchuck guide, knows everything, and the way it sort of resolves that sort of argument I thought was a little funny. My general thoughts on the episode, it was meh. It wasn't the greatest thing. The only thing I did feel that was necessary was sort of Mrs. Beakley and her reaction to Lena and Webby hanging out. Another thing I want to say is that this is a very heavily, like, I don't know about you guys, but I know that I've made a reference before about how this series feels like just a Gravity Falls copy. This episode feels very heavily like a Gravity Falls copy. Like, if you think about it, Huey is, the young boy with a guide, but you could just, swap that out for a journal. He trusts everything that he reads in the guide to make his way through things. And then Webby is sort of like the Maple character, sort of the crazy one, trying to convince Huey to do this and that. The only real, difference between Dipper and Mabel and Huey and Webby is that Huey is convinced that it can all be explained through scientific stuff, whereas Dipper was a lot more believable in the sort of creatures and experiments and stuff like that, like the unknown, we'll put it. Also, I got a very Seuss vibe from Launchpad in this episode, and a very Wendy vibe from Lena. So if you're a Gravity Falls fan, you'll probably enjoy it. I'm a Gravity Falls fan, but I don't know, like, I was just in the more mood for, like, DuckTales, like the first episode where they went off on an adventure in, like, an underground tomb or whatever. Those are pretty much my thoughts on the episode. Again, my general thoughts, it was okay, like, it was average. It wasn't the worst episode, but definitely wasn't the best, in my opinion. If you liked the episode, fair enough. Comment down below. Tell me what you guys thought of the episode. Hit the like button if you enjoyed this video. Subscribe. Stay up to date with more videos that I will have in the future. I do have videos up on my opinions of the previous episodes that came out already. So go check them out if you haven't. And I will see you guys next time. Goodbye.